Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the Belly Up Fantasy Live football stream. Of course, every other Tuesday night at 8:30. And we're going to be talking about the wide receiver consistency grades. And as always, I'm joined here with Lamaro, Adam, Dowhauer, and we have a credible special guest who's taking time out of his busy night to join us here, Mr. Anthony Cervino, host of the FF Face-Off NFL and betting guru for the Game Day NFL. And of course, he's a top 15 fantasy football ranker, which we all love. Anthony, how are you doing?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Absolutely great. Thank you so much for taking out the time to come on and talk with us about the wide receiver consistency grade. We're all very excited to jump in tonight's show. Lamaro, how you been today?
I'm doing excellent. Good to be back.
Adam?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk wide receivers, one of my favorite positions to cover.
And, of course, Dowhauer. Oh, Dowhauer got your mic muted, buddy. Hold on one second. Hey, go ahead. Try to take two on that one.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah,
I said I'm super excited. I said, what's up, MD Nation? I'm super excited to be here. Super excited to talk some football. Season's coming on. We had some free agency wrapping up. We got the draft coming. Let's get talking about football.
Absolutely. Before we do, I actually have a question for Anthony, or more of a thing I wanted to get into, because my other show, the MD's Fantasy Football Show, that airs at 11 to 12:30 on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network on Fridays. We're also doing some polls lately to kind of get some interaction going. And Anthony commented and shared one of them from last week, and I wanted to talk to him about it because it was pretty funny. The news about the Washington football team possibly having a permanent team name, that possibly being their permanent team name, came out, and I was completely turned off by it. And I put out a poll saying, is it the laziest or the dumbest decision the organization has ever made? But Anthony had a different take, and he wasn't the only one, which is why I wanted to ask him this question. Please tell me why you actually think the Washington football team is a good thing.
I was into it. Now, at first, last year, I was like, oh, this isn't cool. But once you saw the uniforms, they kept all of their Redskin colors intact. It almost reminds me of like the Alabama uniforms a little bit in college, so it's unique in that aspect. It has a very, 1970s, 1960s feel to it, and just the Washington football team. It's unique. Nobody else is doing it, and I think it's cool. Like, I don't like replacing and the Redskins with the Sentinels or something like that. Like, what else are we going to call them? Let's just call them the football team.
Look, and I've heard that unique debate before, and yeah, it's unique because I don't know. To me, it's lazy. To me, if you have the marketing team, you call it the football team because you either have no ideas or you don't care enough to come up with an idea. And for me, yes, they kept their colors, so I get that, the historical reference there, maroon and yellow, and it's kind of hard to come up with a name, but I mean, I'm just thinking I'd rather be called the Washington Hogs and keeping the colors intact and doing. I'd rather do anything. To me, it's just completely off-putting. But I had to ask Anthony about that because he quoted on it, and he wasn't alone.
I wouldn't change it if I was them.
I mean, it sounds like they're not going to. And I thought everybody was thinking along the lines of what I was on, and apparently not. Next week, I'll probably have to do a new poll of, do you want them to keep it or change it, just to kind of get an idea of like, all right, where does everybody actually stand on the name now that I know there's so many people actually for it. But it's true, you're unique. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I mean,
I kind of like it too.
Adam likes it too. Dowhauer likes it too. All right,
no,
I guess I'm in the minority. I don't know.
I'm not. I don't like it too. I think that to your point, I get the uniqueness of it, and I think we had a conversation, ourselves between two of us, and we kind of talked about our feelings about this. I think that's something that's unique that nobody else has it, so I can understand the appeal in some senses. But overall, there's been tons of teams that change their names. There's ways to keep your colors. Yellow and red aren't the most unique colors in the world. I mean, we see them in. I could be the Chiefs. I could be Florida State. I could be all kinds of different teams with the same colors. Yeah, I mean,
it's a different shade, but yeah.
But I think that, and you could use the same shade. I understand the 60s, 70s feel. I appreciate that. I don't think you have to lose that feel necessarily to have a team name with your team. You said like the Hogs. I don't think they need to go necessarily there, but it's kind of going the nostalgia route. That might be something that maybe they do look at. I just think it's kind of a cop out, so to speak. And I mean, But I can respect it. Like I said, I understand the appeal that there's not any other team that really named that, but I think that's for a reason.
Go ahead, Lamar. Give your 2 cents.
I got to side with you here, Dan. I feel like a bad team name is better than no team name. You know, I'm getting outside of NFL here a little bit, but we're looking at an NBA franchise named the New Orleans Pelicans. It's not bad enough they play at Smoothie King Arena, but they're named the Pelicans, and I would still bet that they marketed better than the Washington football team last year. So I understand the whole Crimson Tide wanting to be good with the bland uniforms and all that, sticking out in that way, but I can't get down with the Washington football team long term. They need a name.
All right. Well, we had a little fun there. Let's get into some wide receivers. We've been talking about our consistency grades throughout this little series here. We come into the wide receivers, and this is the one I was probably looking forward to the most because the wide receivers are pretty much they are the best ones to talk about consistency grade wise because they have the most deviation from their consistency and where they actually finished. And again, for those who weren't with us for the last couple of episodes, our grades are going to be a little bit different than other people because, especially when it comes to the wide receivers and the running backs, because we will calculate that you are a starter if you finished within the top 36, because we are calculating that if you finish in the top 36, you are a viable flex play. Therefore, you are a viable person to be starting in a particular person's lineup. So kicking things off, we got Stephon Diggs, and there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to Stephon Diggs. Mostly, can he repeat? That's essentially what it's centered around. Can he repeat the targets? Can he repeat being number one? Can that Buffalo offense repeat? Can Josh Allen repeat? It all kind of goes hand in hand. Anthony, what are your thoughts on Stephon Diggs being the top consistent receiver again next year?
I think he has a very good shot of repeating. If you look what Buffalo has done with their backfield, nothing of note as of yet. They didn't run the ball a lot last year. They lost John Brown, who's still a really good receiver and had a really good rapport with Josh Allen. They bring in Manny Sanders, and he'll have a little bit of an impact. I know people are clamoring for Gabriel Davis, but all signs are pointing to Stephon Diggs having another big year. And I've always been a Stephon Diggs guy dating back to his Vikings days. And me and my co-host at the FF Faceoff, he's a Thielen guy. I always sided with Diggs. And finally, when he gets a shot to be the guy in the right offense, I think we're seeing the true ceiling of Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, you were both on the same page when it came to Stephon. I was always Stephon over Adam Thielen myself. Dowhauer, what's your feelings on Stephon Diggs? And maybe more so, do you think Josh Allen can continue to be consistent as he was this past season to really make that happen?
I think to Anthony's point, the volume is going to be there. Buffalo likes to throw the ball. They have the same coordinator. They're pretty much rolling back the same kind of ideology moving forward. I think you're going to see Josh Allen probably be utilized less and less as a runner. That's what teams typically do as they kind of decide whether or not to invest in these guys. So I think that you're definitely going to see the volume there. And I also think one of the things Diggs has going for him is he can line up anywhere on the field. As long as one of the things I thought he got kind of hindered by with the Vikings, you talk about Thielen, is as Thielen played more and more slot, Diggs was forced to kind of be the key outside receiver and kind of couldn't avoid mismatches and had to kind of always fight the top corner. I think with Buffalo, you see him motioned a lot. You see him utilize different places in the formations. It reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown's usage, and that's kind of how I was always a Diggs fan myself. I think he's got a lot of that kind of skill set, and I think as long as he's going to get the targets, which I think will always be there because he can get short, he can get long, he's going to be consistent.
Yeah, I mean the signing of Matt Breida makes you feel like they're probably not going to necessarily upgrade from Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, that they're kind of roll with it. And I mean, Adam, does that mean that this kind of leads into what Chris just said, what Anthony's reiterating, with them kind of having the same ideology in your mind? Is this possible?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's pretty likely he repeats similar production to what he had last year. I mean, you look at it, he didn't miss a beat in December. I think that, to me, would have been the biggest worry, is if you saw a drop-off there in the fantasy playoffs, but there wasn't one. Despite them, throwing in the winner. So I avoid that, and I don't think there's any reason to suggest that, he loses any value.
I'm sorry. Stephon Diggs has 162 targets. The next guy was Devontae Adams with 146 targets. Now, Devontae Adams might have clipped him had he actually played full 16-game season. But 162 targets, that's a lot. Here's what I'll say. Diggs looked like he really relished being the number one receiver. So Lamar, when you're looking at 162, should there be a regression there? But does that matter?
I don't see a big regression just because of the connection that Josh Allen has with Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders coming in. He's kind of a similar fit as John Brown. They're both older receivers, still both speedy guys, but not going to take away that much attention. I know John Brown was hurt most of last season, but neither guy's really going to take much attention away from Josh Allen throwing to Stephon Diggs. So I don't believe that there's going to be much regression in his targets. Maybe I could see like 10 or 15 less targets, but I still see Diggs producing at a high level because I actually think Josh Allen's going to take another step forward this year. And kind of a quiet point. Forward. Yeah, I really think so. I think this is the year. He's the golden arm. But the Bills brought back Darrell Williams and John Felicia.
Step aside, Mahomes. Here comes Josh Allen, says Lamar.
Oh, I didn't say that.
All right, well, look, there's going to be regression in some sense because I just can't see him getting 162 targets again. But is that regression 162 to 140? And does that matter? I think that's more what it boils down to. Emmanuel Sanders, you're not going to scare me. In fact, does he play as much as John Brown did? Yeah, more likely. We just got to, we got word today officially. There's going to be a 17-game season. We were all expecting that. So the numbers are going to have to kind of change as a result. Anthony, let me ask you about that real quick. When you are going to look to rank out and project out when you're looking at these 17 games, are you going to bother with that 18th week, that 17th game, and keep it at 16 games? Or are you actually going to calculate that into your rankings this year?
I'm going to take a wait and see approach because we don't know how teams are going to react to this. So we talked about this on my show yesterday, and it's like, can we potentially see like what the NBA is doing, and there's 82 games, and we see a lot of their superstars, they take nights off. It's one more game. So you would think we're not going to say, okay, come buy my season tickets, and you're not going to get Aaron Rodgers for 2 games. We're not going to tell you which 2 games are. That's not going to happen. So I'm going to continue to rank and project as if these guys are going to be in the lineup. Now, at the end of the year, let's say if Buffalo is doing really well, are they going to rest a Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen? Probably, but I'm already considering that in a 16-game slate.
Right.
So I'm not going to overreact to anything like, oh, they're going to start resting Storm. That's not going to happen.
No, this is the NFL. I 100% agree with you. This is the NFL. And yes, there was always that risk even when it was week 17 in the 16th game. If you were in the playoffs or in a situation, maybe some guys would rest, but it doesn't change here. I believe it just gets extended out one more game where it's that 17th game where maybe they don't play. But that's why most fantasy football championships aren't going to happen week 18. If anything, I think the fantasy season will just extend 1 week with the NFL season where your championships might be week 17, but the 16th game. That's it. So for me personally, when it comes to the preseason rankings that I'll be doing, I'm going to be incorporating just those 16 games that we would, because I usually would leave off that last week anyway. And then as the in season goes, of course, that's always a week to week factor that we'll know anyway. So it's not going to change too much for me, other than we're just going to extend it out maybe 1 game. Let's talk about Calvin Ridley, and he's number 2 on our list. 93% of the time he finished in the top 36. And again, if you want to check out how many times these guys finished in the top 5, top 10, top 15, or top 36, you can go to bellyupfantasysports.com, go to the research tab. We have it all laid out for you guys there. I think my more important question when it comes to Calvin Ridley is this the year he truly usurps Julio Jones? Because last year, I don't think really counts in a lot of people's minds due to the fact that Julio only played, I believe, about 9 games. So, Lamar, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about Calvin Ridley? Does he continue this elite performance? Is he the number 1 over Julio Jones?
I would say in fantasy he is for sure. I'm not sure if he's the number 1 in Matt Ryan's mind, being that he's probably going to be under center for most of the season for the Falcons, barring injury. I do see the Falcons taking a quarterback, but whoever they take, I don't see him playing this year. So I still think that Julio Jones is going to command the most attention from Matt Ryan if he's healthy, but Calvin Ridley is a big play receiver in that offense. So if you're looking at it from just a fantasy perspective, I would definitely look at Calvin Ridley as the wide receiver 1 over Julio Jones.
What are your thoughts, Adam?
I think it's tricky to call really either of them the true wide receiver 1. When they were both on the field last year, they were both averaging about the same amount of targets, about the same amount of yards. I do not think that Ridley's stats were really boosted all that much from losing Julio. If anything, he gained an extra target or two, but those targets were a little less efficient. So it seemed to balance itself out pretty well. I think he could take a step forward, but I'm not sure by how much. I don't think it would be by a lot.
I like that you hit on the fact that Calvin Ridley did get a target or two more, because one of the questions that you have to have in this situation is Calvin Ridley without Julio, what is he? Is he a guy who can't take on that top corner? Is he a wide receiver too? He answered that question last year. That was completely answered, where you could be the number one guy, you could be getting double covered, you can be matched up in the top corner, you're still going to produce as an elite receiver. So that question was answered. Dowhow, is there anything about the Arthur Smith coaching now? Does anything about the scheme change do anything in your mind when it comes to these two receivers?
I mean, I think it's got to be interesting. You're going from a pass happy coordinator, Dick Harder, to a guy who's known basically to pass the last resort. You saw A.J. Brown was pretty much the primary target receiver in the Tennessee offense last year. Corey Davis had a decent year, but you're kind of curious to see who becomes that Corey Davis, who gets that 4 or 5 targets per game. I don't know if Atlanta has established who they're going to have as their key running back yet, but I would imagine they are trying to build an identity as a more physical team. And if that's the case, I do think you're going to see both these players, have some question marks around them and see who kind of rises in the system. Skill set wise, I think that Ridley has opportunity to do well in PPR, because you see some of the guys like a Corey Davis or AJ Humphrey, Adam Humphries, be able to be utilized in Tennessee's offense in a pretty consistent manner, but like I said, not really get more than 5 or 6 targets. But you saw A.J. Brown, a big, strong target, especially with those slants, especially those deep crosses when you're using the play action that Arthur Smith likes to use. And is that the guy they're kind of using in more so in their typical game planning? So I think it'll be interesting to kind of, unfold as the season progresses.
What are you feeling, Anthony?
I like that you brought up Arthur Smith, because I am a little bit worried about scheme change. They brought in Mike Davis, who I think is a really good fit if he is going to be the starting running back on the team. He's an upgrade over Todd Gurley. He's an upgrade over Brian Hill. They're both free agents, probably unlikely to come back. Ito Smith is lingering on the roster. Kadri Allison. This should be Mike Davis's backfield. And I think the Falcons are a team with so many defensive needs now, especially in the secondary. 2 guys already signed with Dallas. They need to fill those needs. They cannot go and draft a running back early. They need to get this defense better. If this defense shows any signs of improving, are the Falcons going to be the number 3 team in passing plays per game? There's going to be a lot of changes in Atlanta. So we could see a decrease in volume for all parties involved at the wide receiver position. That being said, Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, they're the 1A and 1B. I do think it's still going to be Julio in the minds of a Matt Ryan, but we do know, as you said, that Calvin Ridley is a number 1 wide receiver. It's a matter of when will it be his time? When will Julio either fade or move on to another chapter? I like Calvin Ridley a lot in fantasy, but could we see a regression because of all the changes in Atlanta? I'll say yes, but until I see it, this is another. I need to see it before I react. So as of now, I'm going to continue as if Ridley is going to be a top fantasy receiving option.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, where at the end of the day, you're still talking about 2 guys who frankly could finish in the top 12, depending on what Atlanta does defensively. And I think that's the key. And I was actually going to ask you about that, and you kind of hit it already, where you think they're going to go draft defense early, because that's my thought. Is in the second, we don't know exactly what they're going to do in the first round yet. But my thought is in the second round, having a high second round pick, if you have a Travis Etienne, or maybe more importantly, more of a scheme fit, a Najee Harris sitting there possibly, if they go that route, I think we get the answer to our question as to what Arthur Smith is going to want to run. And therefore, there's going to be a lot less, to your guys' point, volume. And it's going to kind of take away from everybody. As far as Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley goes, I agree with everyone saying about Julio Jones being number 1 in Matt Ryan's mind. I do wonder if he's the number 1 in the organization's mind, though, because they have to have in the back of their heads that come 2022, Julio Jones is more likely than not, I would think at this point, is not going to be there. whether it be through trade or cuts or what have you. I think the time is that they're going to be moving on from him soon, and it's really going to depend. It's always going to depend on health. But with Julio, it really does depend on health because he's had a lot of lower leg nagging injuries, have been getting in the way, and that's where I think Calvin Ridley will ultimately, from a fantasy standpoint, finish as the number one receiver in the Atlanta because he'll actually be on the field more. So I'm going to draft Calvin Ridley ahead of Julio Jones. I'm going to rank Calvin Ridley ahead of Julio Jones this year. They'll still be top. They'll still be at the top area, not getting crazy. But I am going to have Calvin Ridley ahead for that factor. I want to move on here. Tyreek Hill is another very curious case, and I kind of want to lump in Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams because I think they're both guys that had crazy touchdown production last season. Devontae Adams had 18 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill had 15. When you're looking at these guys and they were 87, 86%, they were the top two receivers, but they were 3 and 4 in consistency. It just kind of shows you the fluctuation when it comes to the wide receiver position. What are we looking at in the Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams? Is there repeat performances on the horizon? Do we have to compensate for some regression? With the Chiefs, the first thing that pops into my mind is that everything centered around Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And not that they weren't always the top targets to begin with, but usually there's a little bit more of a spreading out, a little bit more running. I got to think Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets more involved. Anthony, when you're looking at Tyreek Hill, what are you thinking as far as can he continue on this double-digit touchdowns that he was on this season?
I mean, Tyreek Hill, I've never seen anything like it. Sammy Watkins is gone. That's really a non-factor here. It is going to be Tyreek Hill. It is going to be Travis Kelce. Now, can Tyreek Hill continue this way? As long as Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, I can't say no.
Right.
It's just like you bring up Devontae Adams. It wasn't just this year in which Devontae Adams was blowing up. If you go back to last season or what is it, 2019?
Yeah.
He was a monster in 2019 too in terms of what he was doing in fantasy. So it's a matter of, it's Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, not much else at pass catcher. And then in Kansas City, you have Kelce, you have Tyreek Hill, but behind them, there's nothing. And these are both high-volume passing attacks, high-scoring offenses, and two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Adam, do you think that Matt LaFleur will kind of go back to what he did in 2019 where they let Andrew Jones run the football instead of Aaron Rodgers throwing the football all the time like they did this past year? Or do you think they'll continue with what they did in 2020 instead?
I think that could go either way, but as for what's been said, like Aaron Rodgers definitely trusts Devontae Adams with the ball much more than he does any of his other targets. So if it's in Aaron Rodgers' hands, like if Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball in the red zone, it's very likely going to Devontae Adams. So unless those touchdowns go to Aaron Jones, it will be Devontae Adams, I think. I don't think any of the other receivers are going to take much up from them.
And it looks like Green Bay, once again, will not be adding another wide receiver. As soon as they signed Devin Funchess, I was like, oh, all aboard. Here comes Alan Lazard's number 2 again. Go ahead, Anthony.
Since 2016, Devontae Adams has had double-digit touchdowns in every season but 2019, and he only played in 12 games. And that was kind of an awkward year with the first year in LaFleur's offense.
Well, and that was why I brought that up, because that was also the year Aaron Jones went crazy scoring touchdowns, and they were kind of running the ball more when they got in the red zone. So it's which one are you kind of see? Dowhauer, when you're looking at Devontae Adams, you're looking at Tyreek Hill. Should these guys be the top 2 guys because of their high-volume offenses, because they are consistent, because they're such monsters, or are they going to take a little bit of regression in your mind?
Well, I still think Stephon Diggs has got to be considered as one of the top guys, but I think these are amongst the top 3 guys. I like these 2 better than Calvin Ridley. I think that when you look at Tyreek Hill's skills, they translate no matter where he's on the field. He can score in the red zone. He can score from 80 yards away. The thing I would worry about maybe is a little bit of regression of touchdowns. You don't see receivers consistently have back-to-back 15 touchdown seasons. Same thing with Adams. I'm kind of concerned about maybe a little regression of touchdown-wise. But their usage, I don't really see changing much. As Anthony kind of pointed out, neither one of these teams has done a whole lot this offseason to add a whole lot of other pieces to take away targets. Kansas City's kind of against the salary cap, a lot of issues other than just their offensive line, but you can't imagine they're going to spend much of their draft capital or any much free agency adding more playmakers to that offense. He added Le'Veon Bell and he could barely utilize. So I think you're going to continue to see Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, eat from week to week, especially Hill's ability, like I said, to score from anywhere. And then Devontae Adams is probably my most consistent receiver. I think him and Diggs are would be the big argument. Devontae Adams, as long as he's healthy, Aaron Rodgers is going to throw him the ball. I mean, that's been a given since he's been out there. It doesn't matter if he's double teamed, doesn't matter if he's triple teamed. Aaron Rodgers has a good feel for him, and he likes to look for him in the red zone. I think that continues. Like I said, I just think it's going to be a little hard to have as many touchdowns as he had last year because you don't see that consistently really happen very often. But I think it's, as Anthony kind of pointed out, like I said, double-digit touchdowns is probably a given.
What do you think, Lamaro?
I have to agree there. I don't think volume is going to change for either of these guys because I think both the Chiefs and the Packers are going to struggle a little bit more running the football this year. The Packers lost Corey Linsley to the Chargers in the offseason, and I believe the Chiefs cut Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher. So those are key losses on the line for both teams. And if you're looking at just what the Chiefs have in the backfield in terms of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's more of a Darren Sproles type of running back. He's not proven yet that he can necessarily be a power back. He's undersized for his position. So I see the Chiefs needing to air it out. And as long as they can keep Patrick Mahomes healthy, which is a big question mark with the losses, I see Tyreek Hill have another big year. And same thing on the Packers side, not going to be able to run the ball as effectively, so they're going to need to air it out to Devontae again.
You know, since week, and here's just a note on Adams, since week 1 of 2018, including the playoffs, Devontae Adams has played in 45 games. He's scored a touchdown or went over 100 yards in 36 of them.
It's why he's going to be my number one.
Same.
Yeah. It's why he's going to be my number one. The touchdown, everything from the touchdowns to the target share on the team, to Aaron Rodgers, to not having competition. Everything screams Devontae Adams has to be your number one. The only thing you worry about Devontae Adams is he seems to have this little hamstring injury that crops up for like a couple of games every year. He's going to be your number one. He's going to be the top 5 consistency. And with Tyreek Hill, I laugh. I mean, I live in Jersey. I'm around the Philadelphia area. I'm not an Eagles fan, but I'm in the Philadelphia area. And I go back to his days in Philadelphia where he would forget to run the football. And now that he has Patrick Mahomes, it's like on crack times 10, he'll forget to run the football. So that's what you don't have to worry about the volume of it. And now, I mean, I don't believe in Mecole Hardman as a true number 2 receiver. I don't believe in Demarcus Robinson. So unless they're going to add somebody that we're not seeing, unless they're going to draft somebody that we're not seeing, it's going to be centered around Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill one more year. So for me, it's going to be Adams number 1. I think I'm going to have Stephon number 2, just because again, he's the guy. He doesn't even have a Travis Kelce he has to worry about. But then I'm going to have Tyreek Hill right there at number 3. Just the explosiveness, the volume, everything's right there for them to continue this success, and also the coaching styles of it. And I don't think Matt LaFleur goes back to running the football all the time with Aaron Jones because of how effective and how much better, frankly, I thought the Packers offense was this past season by just, you know what, this is Aaron Rodgers. We'll just let him do his thing. There's a curious case on the next guy that we want to talk about, and that's Will Fuller. I couldn't believe it when I started doing my numbers that he was actually the number 5 consistent receiver, 80% of the time, finishing in the top 36. This is a guy who has always been considered streaky. And, you know, there's a lot of things that come unpacked when you're talking about a Will Fuller right now. It's, oh, this was your first healthy season, except for you got busted taking PEDs. So is that the reason that you had a healthy season? And now you're going to Miami, where Tua, I think, throws a nice deep ball, but doesn't throw it very often. Just ask Devontae Parker. It's an offense that has a very good defense. They don't have to get in as many shootouts. So while I love Will Fuller, the talent, and I don't believe that the PEDs made him or anything like that. So we're not going to go in that direction. But when you have Devontae Parker, when you have Tua there, I don't know if Will Fuller's that guy that you're taking, let's say, in the 4th, 5th round, thinking that you got a guy who's going to win you the week like you were thinking about before. We'll start with Lamar on this one. What do you think, Lamar?
I'm so shaky on Will Fuller this season, just primarily because of the quarterback issues. You wouldn't think that the departure of Fitzmagic would be a big deal, but like you mentioned, Tua doesn't throw the deep ball often. He's a super conservative quarterback at this point in his career. Will Fuller is a deep threat type of receiver. Barring injury, he's one of the best deep threat receivers in the league. It's more about the landing spot, not so much an issue with Will Fuller and what I think he can do on the field. It's more so about his landing spot in Miami. I'm just not sure that he's going to be able to produce at a high level for fantasy purposes this year. I'm sure he'll be a great fit on that team and they'll help the young quarterback, but I don't see him being a great fantasy option.
I just want him to be priced at $4,500 in DFS so I can plug him in every Sunday. Go ahead, Adam. What do you think?
I think we could see a more, maybe not the same ceiling that he's had in years past, but I think he could be a much more consistent option, because I don't think we've seen Tua with anyone outside of like maybe Gesicki when he's got a good matchup that gets a lot of separation. Devontae Parker, I mean, he's got very sure hands, sure, but he's doesn't get away from defenders very often. And I think for a young quarterback, someone that will do that for him could be huge. Now, obviously, the fact that he's only played over 13 games once, which was his rookie year, and then 11 games or less every year since then is a problem. But when he's on the field, I think this could be a pretty consistent year for him, since he's kind of made himself less of just a deep threat.
And not to mention he's going to be suspended for week 1 of this season. Dowhauer, when you're looking at the Dolphins passing attack, I mean, are you even attacking from a fantasy perspective Will Fuller or Devontae Parker?
I am. I'm a big Tua fan. I think that we haven't really got to see what Tua has to bring to the table yet. I think he's put in a situation where you were comparing him to Fitzmagic and what he kind of did for Miami's offense. That offensive line wasn't anything special. Those running backs were decent. There's not a lot of separation, as Adam alluded to, from the receiver position. When Preston Williams got hurt, they really had no second receiver to even really worry about. So that's why Parker had even a harder time getting any kind of separation. I think Tua's job was not to lose the game last year, and I think that's kind of how he played. I think this year you're going to see him kind of unshackled, so to speak. I'm not worried about the deep ball. I think in Alabama we saw when he came out that freshman year and he came in that championship game, there's plenty of deep balls. There's plenty of accuracy. I think this guy is a bona fide star in the making. And I think you put talent around him, he's going to be effective. I think Will Fuller is a fantastic signing. And I think fantasy wise, I think he, as you know, they kind of alluded to about him increasing his ability to run patterns and be more than just a one trick pony. It's all going to come down to health. If you think Will Fuller is going to be healthy, I think you have to draft him because he's going to be productive. You play the Jets twice a year. I think there's plenty of opportunity to have big plays and big games. So yeah, I'm a big Will Fuller fan and Miami fan overall.
I didn't think about that. The Jets twice a year.
That saves his value all by itself. What are you thinking, Anthony?
I'm in on Will Fuller, and injury history aside, he was asked to be the number 1 wide receiver last year in Houston, and he delivered. However, you have Deshaun Watson, and then you're going from Deshaun Watson to Tua, and if you can't tell, I'm not a Tua guy. I think he's a nice guy, I'm sure, off the field. But as a football player, I have questions about Tua. And they're going to surround him with Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, Gesicki, who's from, about 20 minutes north of me. Real great players. What are they going to do? They traded back up. Is that to go get a Kyle Pitts and start running two tight end sets? Are they going to add another wide receiver? I think they're going to give Tua every reason to succeed. I just don't know how much I believe in it. One of you guys brought up the defense. The defense is going to be outstanding. There's not going to be a lot of shootouts. So in terms of Will Fuller's fantasy value, I think if you're buying into Tua, you're going to buy into Will Fuller and overdraft him. If you're in a league that's maybe they don't really trust Tua like I don't, you could probably get Will Fuller at a value. So he's the type of player this year that's price driven, completely price driven for me, as if I'm going to roster him or not.
Yeah, it's 100% ADP in my book as well. I am a believer in Tua, but my problem from a fantasy standpoint is going to be I think they did trade back up to number 6 to get another weapon, whether that be Jabbar Chase or whoever. And I think ultimately what it's going to come down to is that you're not going to be in a lot of shootouts, and you're going to have a lot of people who want to touch the ball. You're Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, whoever's coming out of the backfield, because they usually have a good pass catcher coming out of the backfield, and then whoever X player, because I do believe it's going to be a Jabbar Chase or Kyle Pitts. And I think there's too many people to go around where even if I believe Tua can be great, I still don't think there's going to be enough volume for anybody there. So it's going to be an ADP value for me when it comes to Will Fuller, Devontae Parker. I'm not taking these guys. I mean, when redraft purposes, I'm not taking them any earlier in the 8th round. Now, I want to look from a dynasty lens real quickly. I do want to roll the dice on a Will Fuller because you don't know where he's going to wind up next year, and I do believe he's a big impact player. So from that standpoint, I want to stand pat on a Will Fuller guy. But I do want to move on. I want to talk about Allen. I want to start lumping these guys together, but we need to talk about Allen Robinson separately because he just. I feel so bad for this guy. I really, really do. Like you thought maybe you escaped Mitchell Trubisky, only to get hit with Andy Dalton, and it's just like, oh man, like what is going on? Dow Howard, you used to be a Bears fan. You're an ex-Bears fan because you just couldn't take it anymore. You just throw up the white flag. You're just like, that's it. I'm done. It's over.
Mitchell Trubisky was enough. Yep. Mahomes over Trubisky. I mean, taking Trubisky over Mahomes and trading a pick for the 49ers for a guy they weren't even going to pick. I'll never understand that. Yes. Alan, bitter. Yes, I am bitter. Allen Robinson, you forgot one other scrubby quarterback he played with, and that's Blake Bortles. This man has overcome pretty much his entire career of crappy quarterbacks. So I definitely feel bad for the man, but I think that just shows you how good he really is. And I do think Andy Dalton, as much as I'm not a big fan of his and not a big fan of the signing at all, unfortunately is better than Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. I think when Andy Dalton was healthy and he played behind Dallas, you saw Amari Cooper get his targets. He's going to throw when he was in Cincinnati. AJ Green got his targets. I don't see that changing. I don't think the Bears' offensive line is particularly good, so I think there's not going to be a whole lot of second and third options. You saw Bill Lazor's offense when he ran in Cincinnati. He likes to use that primary receiver a lot, and you saw Allen Robinson's targets go up a lot when he took over as offensive coordinator last year, or the play calling, I should say. And I think that's going to continue. I think that you're going to see Allen Robinson be the guy, particularly because they have to kind of justify bringing him back, and they have to make those quarterbacks look decent somehow. Who else are you going to throw the ball to?
Yeah, Anthony, I'm glad you, Chris, I'm glad you mentioned the Bill Lazor thing. Anthony, is Bill Lazor calling the plays enough to overcome whatever average quarterback at best is back there throwing him the ball?
I like Bill Lazor a lot, and actually you brought up Lazor in Cincinnati with Dalton. It was one of Dalton's more productive runs with any offensive coordinator. So I think it's the right fit. We know Allen Robinson is going to be productive no matter who's at quarterback. We might not ever see his true ceiling, but I think Andy Dalton's very capable of getting the job done. So yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on Andy Dalton than the consensus, and I think he's an upgrade as long as the offensive line's intact. Now that's my issue here. Trubisky is a hell of a lot more mobile than Andy Dalton. I think this whole room is more mobile than Andy Dalton. So if the Bears can get the protection down, Andy Dalton should have a pretty good year, and I have no issue with drafting Allen Robinson, assuming he's going to have another top 12 season.
Lamar, Allen Robinson, is this guy you just plug and play him knowing that he's going to be a low-end wide receiver one and he call it a day?
When you catch 100 balls with Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles as your quarterback, you got something going for you. So yes, you got to plug and play him. I think Andy Dalton is still a top 30 quarterback in the league. He's damn close to 30. He's damn close to 30. All right, but I think he's a step up. He's a step up from Mitch and Nick Foles. So I think Robinson's going to have another big year playing on the franchise tag.
Adam, I think you live closest to Chicago. Can we send you out there and try to get you a tryout, and maybe that'll be an improvement?
Daniel plays.
Yeah, could be Chase Daniel. But yeah, I think you guys have pretty much hit it on the head. I mean, at worst, absolute worst, Andy Dalton's a lateral move, and we've seen what Allen Robinson did, especially in that second part of the year. So I have very little concerns. And in terms of dynasty, if the owner thinks that maybe after he might get a long-term deal done, you might want to buy him, because I cannot imagine, unless that something happens at the quarterback position in Chicago, other than Andy Dalton, that he's there for very much longer.
For what it's worth, Andy Dalton from weeks 11 to 17, and was he was healthy for that stretch. He was the QB 12
last season.
Yeah, last season in that stretch. He had, in that same 11 to 17 stretch, Amari Cooper, wide receiver 24, Lamb 28, Gallup 29.
He can get the ball to his playmakers. That's always been, look at AJ Green. He can get the ball to his playmakers. And even when Tyler Boyd came along, he would still be able to get to him. That is the one thing he can do. Is it always going to be pretty? Nope. Do you want to play him during prime time? Nope. But you can get the ball to his players. And that's why Allen Robinson, he'll stay that low-end wide receiver one to me.
Andy Dalton in that stretch, quarterback 13 was Russell Wilson. And I know Russell Wilson took a nosedive. Kyler Murray, QB 14.
No, that I'm glad you brought that up though, Anthony, because that is the definition of perception versus reality when you start to look at that. Because the perception of Andy Dalton was that he was.
Know where Tua was. I'm still scrolling down.
He's like, no, I got all these numbers. No, it's not what happened. No, but that is the perception versus reality with Dalton, is that he was just beyond terrible. And the fact is, you know what? Especially when it came to getting the ball to his weapons, he wasn't. He wasn't absolute garbage. It was a bad situation there in Dallas, really, frankly, and overall. I want to move on, though. I want to lump these two together because they're kind of in a similar situation. I want to start with Adam because I want to start off with the dynasty perspective on these guys. Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, both kind of in similar situations where they are going to be in their quarterbacks are older. They are on teams that have multiple weapons, multiple target hogs. Which one of these guys we'll talk about next year too, but which one of these guys from a dynasty perspective do you feel more confident about moving forward? I mean, Chris Godwin's still on a 1-year deal. It's not a given that Deontay Johnson's definitely back next season. What are you looking at there?
I mean, they are very, very close. I think I would have to lean Chris Godwin just because I think he's the better talent. But in terms of, like, I don't think either of them have a very much of a drop off, really. I mean, the AB and Mike Evans, especially like AB getting added, Chris Godwin only played 4 games before AB, started playing a lot. So it's not going to change what Chris Godwin did from last year. Obviously, hopefully he gets a healthy season and a full season in. And with Deontay Johnson, in the future, like if it's another team or past the Big Ben era, the drops could be an issue. But as for right now, there's no way that they can fix both the offensive line and the running back situation in one offseason at this point. Like, there's just not enough players. There's not enough draft capital for them to fix both. So fix the offensive line. That's great. Get a running back. That's great. I don't think for this year that impacts Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I tend to agree that. I think the one thing that is interesting when it comes to these guys, though, is that Chris Godwin plays 12 games. He finished half-point PPR anyway. He finishes wide receiver 32. Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 22, and he played a full season. Or I believe he missed 1 game, if I'm not mistaken. So Chris Godwin, even with an Antonio Brown and a Mike Evans and a new quarterback, I still think he's the better player. I just do. And that's kind of where I'm going to lean a bit. But what do you think, Dowhauer?
I think I tend to agree with the better player aspect. I think Godwin's more of an overall mismatch. I think he's physically more gifted. He has more strength. Deontay Johnson is an excellent quick receiver. I think the questions you have with Pittsburgh is they're going to have a change of coordinator. You don't really know how the offense is going to necessarily change. They did bring back Juju. And they also have Claypool, who could still take another step. I mean, he had some big games last year, but he wasn't necessarily a featured part of their offense. I do wonder if Deontay Johnson does get lost from game to game, where the consistency is kind of something that is lacking there because they have a different change in the offensive scheme. I don't think they drop back the ball and throw 50 times again this year like they were last year, a lot of the games. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a conservative Pittsburgh offense overall, a more run-oriented Pittsburgh offense. Now, I still think Deontay Johnson is the best receiver on the team. I just wonder how other guys are kind of utilized in different aspects, especially in the red zone. I think you're going to see like tight end and Claypool are going to be guys who are usually going to be looked for. While I think in Tampa, you see Mike Evans almost always gets the red zone looks, but usually if it's not him, it's going to be Godwin or one of the tight ends. I think Godwin's one of those guys that he's a mismatch, and because he can go out different places on the field, he's going to have the opportunity to probably be more consistent overall.
We lose Danny.
I don't know. It looks like he did.
Well, I'll just go ahead then. Had Juju Smith-Schuster not re-signed with the Steelers, the volume in Pittsburgh for Deontay Johnson would have been enough for me to be swayed Deontay Johnson over Chris Godwin. But with Juju back, he's going to command enough of a target share from Roethlisberger. And with Roethlisberger being aging and it being a questionable offensive line scenario now, I'm going to lean towards Godwin as well, as I do believe Godwin's the better player. And with Juju back in Pittsburgh, Johnson just doesn't have the volume to entice me to take him over Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case.
Listen, I'm
What do
going
you
to
think,
jump.
Anthony?
I'm going to jump in
Go ahead.
here. I like Chris Godwin a lot, and it's very, very crowded in Tampa. But we saw Tom Brady can support the crowded supporting cast. Could we have seen a better version of Chris Godwin had he been fully healthy last year? That's where we don't know the true ceiling of Chris Godwin in this offense with Brady, because he was banged up. He'd be in, he'd be out, he'd be in, and he'd be out. My concerns, I have a lot more concerns about the future of the quarterback position in Pittsburgh than I do in Tampa. As of right now, I cannot say we have seen any regression from Tom Brady. Whereas Ben Roethlisberger, he looked outstanding from weeks 1 to 11, and then the entire team face planted. My question is, you have the number 1 defense, or at worst, you have a top 5 defense. Why are you the number 2 team in passing plays per game? Why are you throwing that much? You don't have a need to. You can't run the ball. They signed Callum Balaj. I'm not really thrilled about that. That's not going to do anything. And if you're going to ask Big Ben to throw that much, his arm's gonna have a lot of wear and tear. It's almost like Drew Brees. How Drew Brees would fall off at the tail end of the year, only we are seeing it a lot earlier with Ben Roethlisberger. I like to bust balls, but he doesn't look like he keeps himself in great shape in the offseason, where like even this year we saw Drew Brees pushing the sled. Is he coming back? Ben Roethlisberger didn't do that as a rookie, never mind now.
Yeah.
So, I have a lot of concerns, talking about dynasty. Who's going to be the quarterback in Pittsburgh next year? And if it's Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know if I want to own any of their receivers.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback, but at this point, I don't trust it. And you guys put up the offensive line. That offensive line, you're losing Pouncey. They lost quite a few guys.
I was going to ask you though, Anthony. The offensive line was definitely deteriorating over the last few years, and I think that we kind of saw that. But also, Ben, I don't think it was necessarily he lost it as much as he hurt his knee. And once he hurt his knee, they went shotgun and they just did all the quick passes. I don't know if it was just he couldn't step into his throws anymore. But I'm questioning more that, like to your point, he's not necessarily in the best shape. I wonder if it wasn't just the knee thing that was really bothering him as much as where Drew Brees. It was definitely obvious that he's just throwing ducks out there. I think Ben looked like he was just afraid to step into anything. And like I said, they weren't even having him under center for half the time. Or most of the game. I don't think he was under center.
I know I just joined back in here. My internet kicked out on me for a little bit. But my sentiment is exactly when it came to Ben Roethlisberger, because there's been this big narrative going around that his arm's done. And all I can say is when you go back, you watch the tape, it wasn't until he hurt his knee where suddenly he couldn't throw the deep ball anymore. Now, he was naturally making the choice to throw the ball shorter from the beginning of the season more times than not. But he is able to get the ball down the field to Chase Claypool when he wanted to before he injures that knee. I believe that was against Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. From that point on, it was a little bit. It was crazy, the offense they were running, because James Conner wasn't a factor anymore because they couldn't run the football and all of that. Who didn't get to talk? Did anybody not get to talk while I was out?
No, we're all good.
No,
we're all good. All right. We can move on and let's talk. I'm going to skip AJ Brown real quickly because I want to talk about a curious case here with John Brown. It kind of reminds me of when we had our running backs and we had Mike Davis fell into the top 10 when it came to consistency grades. John Brown comes in the top 10 consistency grades, even though he only played, I believe it was 9 games on the season. Finishes the wide receiver 79, so you see the big difference there. But the reason I want to talk about him singly is because he's going to the Raiders, where we just saw Nelson Aguilar maybe jumpstart his career and become a wide receiver 29. John Brown, I don't know how healthy he can stay for a full season, so we'll put that out there. But John Brown, to me, is hands down the number 1 target going to the Raiders. And this is a terrible defense, a terrible team, in a high-powered offensive division. If John Brown was to stay healthy, let's say 12 games, 13 games, where do you think he's going to go? What do you think he can do, Anthony?
Is John Brown like Nelson Aguilar? It's hard for the comparison for me. I feel like John Brown's a little bit more of a polished receiver. You have Henry Ruggs. I'm drawing a blank on the other rookie that had a little bit of hype last year.
Edwards.
Yeah, Brian Edwards. John Brown, in theory, John Brown should be the guy. But what is the Raiders going to do? This is a team that blew up their offensive line. They signed Kenyon Drake. They're already talking about putting him at wide receiver. So fantasy football wise for John Brown, sure, I'll take a shot. I'm not going to overpay for him because I don't trust anything going on with John Gruden or the Las Vegas Raiders right now. I think it's a good landing spot if it works, but I am a little bit worried. Like I'd rather take John Brown in best ball right now.
No, I don't disagree with that. But that was kind of the point. Like, no one drafted Nelson Aguilar, and he became the wide receiver 29. And that's more my point on the. I'm not comparing their skill sets, but they're more in their roles of if you're the number one receiver on that team, and no one's drafted because no one's going to draft John Brown redraft leagues even. I can't see him getting drafted any earlier than the 13th, 14th round, if at all. We're talking about a guy who has the potential, has a pathway to really have some value unexpectedly. Maybe that's just me. What do you think, Lamaro?
Yeah, I got to agree there. Kind of a surprising stat here. John Brown, before he was hurt last year, was 10th in contested catch rate. So he makes those deep plays for bad offenses, and I could see him doing that for Derek Carr in a similar way that Nelson Aguilar did. So I think that's a great comparison. Greg Olsen needs to find ways to get John Brown the ball down the field because he might be 30 years old, but he could still play. And this Raiders team is probably going to be getting blown out a lot this year, and their offense is not going to be able to run the ball because they got rid of all their linemen. So I could see them getting behind in a lot of games, having to air it out, which is good for fantasy in terms of wide receivers. So I like John Brown as a late-round flyer value pick.
I mean, ultimately, like Anthony said, I don't know if anybody knows what they're doing. Adam, what do you see a little sleeper value there for John Brown?
There could be, but I mean, I think it's worth noting that nobody playing wide receiver, barring some crazy change, is going to be the real wide receiver one because that's Waller.
Right.
Like Waller is by far their best target. That being said, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that Raiders passing attack goes because, as I mentioned in the quarterback consistency, I think Carr is relatively slept on, and I think he's one of the better deep ball throwers in the league, at least top 12 or so. And that could be a great fit for John Brown if it wasn't for the fact that Colton Miller is his only offensive lineman worth a damn, which is not the best position to be in. If they can, scheme some protection for him and just figure everything out, then I think that John Brown could be a solid wide receiver 3 to maybe even a low-end wide receiver 2. But there's just so many factors at play here that I think outside of that late-round flyer that you suggested, I don't think he's, someone that I would lean on.
Dahar, Kenyon Drake or John Brown? Which one's the number one receiver on the Raiders next
year? I go Hunter Renfrow.
Everybody's sleeping on Renfrow, man. Just wait.
I know.
If Henry Ruggs takes a step up this year, how much of that goes to him that was going to Aguilar and that we're projecting to go to Brown? And that's another thing I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that's a fair point because Ruggs and Brown are similar in that sense. The question is, do you believe Ruggs takes a step up? I'm not a Ruggs fan. I never was. So it's hard especially since I do believe in John Brown as a nice polished receiver. It's just hard for me to believe he's going to take enough of a step to overtake Brown if they're both on the field at the same time. Dahar, give us your 2 cents. I want to close out this segment so we can get to the next group.
I just think that John Brown, like you said, maybe it's worth a late round flyer. Maybe you go in the 14th, 15th round. This is your 4th receiver that you're kind of adding and see if you get an upside and he blows up for you. But I think overall, nobody could trust Oakland's offense. Not Oakland, I'm sorry, the Vegas's offense. And you look at what Gruden's doing right now. God knows who's going to be the leading target from week to week. I mean, John Brown should be a guy that Derek Carr looks for a lot. He does run good rep patterns. He does do well as the featured guy. But I don't know if he's going to be the featured guy. As Adam talked about, Waller's usually that guy. You got 2 running backs who can catch the ball. One who we talked about last show, Jacobs, who never gets thrown the ball in the first place. And then you have all these other rookie receivers that they drafted with Ruggs and Edwards. And I wouldn't be shocked if they draft another receiver or tight end this year. So I just think it's too hard to take anything other than a 14th, 15th round flyer on John Brown.
Does anybody want to take A.J. Brown in the top 5 next year? No Corey Davis, no Arthur Smith, no Adam Humphries. Josh Reynolds is their number 2 receiver. Does he make that leap to be a top 5 receiver this year? We'll start with Adam.
I don't excuse me. I don't think he takes that big of a leap. I think a firm low end wide receiver 1, maybe to 7, 8, but I don't think the top 5. I don't think he's not going to get the volume that someone like a Diggs or an Adams or a Hill, even a Hill, can get, just because they're going to be a run first team. And I think that the defense will probably improve at least a little bit, maybe not to being average or much better than that. But I do think that overall, I can't see him taking that big of a step because I just don't think the volume will be there.
I don't know. Wide receiver 12, 14 games, 204 points, was banged up for most of the season, had a shared target with Corey Davis. I think I'm leaning towards it myself. What do you think, Lamaro?
I do think I have to agree with Adam's point that the volume is not going to be there because it is such a run-first team. They rely so heavily, Mike Vrabel and the whole offense relies so heavily on King Henry to just carry the team and play the time of possession game and try to win games with their defense. And I also think their defense is going to take a step up. But A.J. Brown, I think Josh Reynolds is good enough to take away the possibility of double teams all the time. So he's good enough to keep defenses honest on A.J. Brown. And A.J. Brown has the big play capability to be in that top 5 receiver range for fantasy. I just don't trust it as a certainty because of the lack of volume.
What are you thinking, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm also worried about volume here for A.J. Brown. They lose Arthur Smith, but they promoted Todd Downing, in-house promotion, a tight ends coach. I'm going to assume he's going to run a similar type of offense going behind Derrick Henry. And just because you peel away Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith is gone, I think Anthony Firkser is an excellent tight end. I don't know how much of a downgrade, and that might sound crazy because of all the fantasy football hype on Jonnu Smith every year, but I think Firkser is going to be a pretty good tight end. We're not going to ask a lot for the guy. He's not going to be Travis Kelce, but can he replicate a 9-touchdown season from Jonnu Smith? I think he can. Josh Reynolds buried with the Rams. He was buried behind at one time Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and when he was asked to start, he was okay. So I think he'll be a solid wide receiver there. I just don't see A.J. Brown's target share going up to allow him to make that leap into that like top 8, top 5 category in fantasy. I think if you put A.J. Brown on the Chiefs or the Buffalo Bills, he's the wide receiver 1 easily. But because of where he's playing right now, I'm gonna draft him according. He'll be a wide receiver 1 somewhere. I'm not gonna draft him assuming he's just gonna start putting up Julio Jones numbers from 3 years ago. I can't do it.
Dow Howard, could he have a season like Kenny Galladay did where he had 119 targets, and because he wound up with 12 touchdowns and 1,300 yards off of those 119 targets, he's able to crack the top 7?
I think you can see the top 7 be cracked. Those numbers are achievable. I think the top 5 is a little too hard for him to get to. I'm not as worried about the volume. I'm more concerned about A.J. Brown getting banged up. I think that's been something he's had an issue since college. He's going to be a guy who probably typically has an issue with 2 to 3 games a year. That's my biggest concern. That's why I don't consider him a top 5. I think that talent-wise and when he's out there, production-wise, I think some of the guys missing. I think that you guys make great points about Josh Reynolds and some of the Firkser being still viable targets. But I don't think there's a guarantee that Tennessee's defense steps up. Number 1, I don't see anything that they did drastically differently that impresses me. And I do think that teams are going to start making it harder and harder for Travis Henry to always beat you. So I do think that there's something that A.J. Brown should be utilized with getting rid of Humphreys. I think that helps because he actually going up in the slot more often, which allows him to be more involved throughout the game. But I do have concerns about the ability to play 12, 13 games.
I mean, that's fair. Maybe I'm too much of a lover on A.J. Brown. I don't know. I think I can see him in the top 5. I really not top 3 because he's not gonna get the targets like you said. It's Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, but I don't think he needs 140 targets to crack that top 5. And because he gets featured, I think without a Corey Davis, the way Stephon Diggs does in the sense of he'll be moved inside, outside, he'll be the number 1 red zone target. I think there's a chance there. Now he might need 14 touchdowns to do it, but I think he can achieve that number. And that's kind of why I lean towards I think he could be up there. But you know what? I'll take AJ Brown before the rest of you guys. That's fine.
To be fair, he was the wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game.
Yeah, no, he was, and that's kind of why I shot it over to Chris, wide receiver 7, and see what you guys thought there. Let's talk about Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, new offense. Does he get the double-digit targets like he did? And if he does that, does he finally correct? Because this is a guy who I feel like he always hovers that low-end wide receiver 1, but really the volume should be there where he should be. Talking about top 7, he should be top 7 in that category. What do you think when it comes to Keenan Allen, Anthony?
In terms of, is he going to be what?
Can he be top 8 this year with a Justin Herbert emerging, but even though it's a new offense?
Yeah, I don't see them really shying away from how they ran the offense last year, even though it's going to be a different system. I do expect the defense to be better. They brought in the defensive coordinator from the Rams. Top to bottom, I always say the Chargers have a top 3 to 5 roster in the league. The issue is injuries. If this defense can stay healthy, maybe we don't see as much volume, but they're not just going to all of a sudden take their foot off the gas. When you have a guy like Justin Herbert who flashes the way he did in his rookie year, you don't see Kansas City or Josh Allen in Buffalo. They're not taking the foot off the gas, and I don't see that either with Justin Herbert. So it's a matter of Keenan Allen continuing to stay healthy now in year 2 with Justin Herbert. Can he take that next level step? I think he can.
What do you think, Dowher?
I mean, I think that we saw last year that as long as Keenan Allen was healthy and out in the field, Justin Herbert looked for him. I think there's no doubt that he can continue to do what he did. I don't really care about the scheme changes. I think that if you look at kind of what the Rams offense ran, the Woods role, the Cooper Kupp role, that's Keenan Allen's role. It's the same kind of player in a lot of senses. I think that he's going to be heavily featured unless there's some drastic changes in the receiving core, which I don't really foresee happening necessarily with the Chargers. I think Keenan Allen sits there as the top dog and has a kind of a key role. He reminds me a lot of Reggie Wayne back in the Colts days, where it was a guy who just you knew game in, game out was going to get those 6 to 8 catches. You didn't know how many yards necessarily it was going to be, but you knew it was going to be 6 to 8 catches, maybe a touchdown here, and that week in, week out, you were going to get that as long as he's on the field. I think there's no doubt that Justin Herbert looks for him the majority of the time, and I think that doesn't change necessarily this year.
Adam, can we finally move on from the Mike Williams is going to break out scenario?
I think it's time. I don't see any indication that that Herbert is like enamored with the guy. Like, I think he treats him like a solid wide receiver too, sure, and that's what he is at this point. Like, I don't see him being any more than that. And I mean the wide receiver too, obviously in that offense, not for fantasy purposes. But I mean, in terms of fantasy, as everyone else has mentioned, if as long as Keenan Allen's healthy, he's one of the best route runners in the league. He's one of the best possession guys in the league. There's no reason for him to not get those double-digit targets, especially when, I mean, really, I think the only other guy who's as consistent as he is as a receiver on their team is Eckler, not Mike Williams or surely not Jalen Guyton. So how
about Jared Cook?
I was going to bring Cook up.
Yeah, I think Keenan Allen's going to be fine.
Go ahead, Lamar.
I love Jared Cook this year, by the way.
If you want to talk about a sleeper tight end that you may not have to draft at all, who should perform well, that's him.
That's the guy.
If you like, I wait a quarterback every year. I also like to wait a tight end, and I'll tell you what, he's going to be right up there in my sleeper list. But Lamar, what are your thoughts on Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much just bouncing off everybody else's sentiments. I agree mostly with what you guys are saying. The scheme changes from Staley and Lombardi aren't enough to scare me. The departure of Hunter Henry means there's going to be volume to be made up for, and I don't believe it's going to be made up by Mike Williams. He is the deep ball threat that's never going to really break out as a true fantasy option week in and week out. So that leaves Keenan Allen to, again, as Howard mentioned, collect anywhere between 6 to 8 to possibly more catches each week. And as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be a top option. And I think Herbert's going to take us going up off of Anthony's point. I think Herbert's going to take that next step as well. Bringing in Corey Linsley from the Packers this offseason was huge. I think he should have been in the Pro Bowl last year. I thought he was one of the bigger snubs. So looking at all that, I believe the Chargers offense is going to be pretty formidable. And I think Keenan Allen's going to have another big year.
I think Keenan Allen, especially when it comes to redraft 2021, is that quintessential. You decide half-point, full-point PPR if you're going to go zero running back or not, because he's that guy you could probably still get in the third round, but his consistency, his targets is what really propels you. It's like, all right, if I went 2 receivers in the first 2 rounds and Keenan Allen sitting in the third round, knowing what his target share is going to be every single game, do I just say, you know what, I'm going to go zero running back, I'm going to take my 3 receivers, and I'm going to keep it going and do it that way? I feel like he's that guy, especially with now that you have a quarterback who can maybe throw the ball down to him down the field a little bit more, too. He doesn't have to be just in the 5-10 yard range like it seemed like it needed to be with Phillip Rivers all the time. I want to get into Amari Cooper. I love Amari Cooper. Listen, I had Amari Cooper ranked as my number 7 wide receiver. I took so much flack for it, and I was going to be right. If Dak Prescott did not go down with an injury, and it drives me nuts, Dak Prescott, stay healthy this year. Amari Cooper, top 10 receiver. I'm taking it right to the bank. And CeeDee Lamb only makes him better. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. Please say I'm right. Anthony, we'll start with you.
Well, if Dak's healthy, listen, I'm a Cowboys fan, but trying to be unbiased, I do see CeeDee Lamb taking that next step. I when it's all said and done, CeeDee Lamb's going to be the number 1 wide receiver on this team, but this could be a 1A and 1B situation with these 2 guys. If Dak's healthy, we know he can support multiple top 10, or at least I believe he can support 2 top 12 fantasy receivers, or at least 2 top 15 fantasy receivers. Can I go as far as saying Amari Cooper is going to be like a top 7? I don't know if I can go that far. I actually see CeeDee Lamb in that spot. But regardless, I think both Lamb and Cooper are going to be in that top 15 range if we get a healthy Dak, because we also have to factor in Ezekiel Elliott. People are down on Zeke, and they're going to be down on Zeke. And if you remember the 5 games that Zeke played with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott looked like Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, and we have 2 tight ends. It's not just Blake Jarwin now. It's going to be Jarwin and Dalton Schultz, because Schultz played really well with Blake Jarwin hurt. I think this offense, obviously it's on Dak Prescott, but if they can figure out the offensive line, hopefully they draft some depth, because Tyron Smith can't stay healthy. Everybody else got hurt too, but it really starts with the line and Dak, and this offense could really explode the way we thought it would last year.
What I love is that CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, they complement each other with the roles that they play within the offense, which is why, to your point, Anthony, I think they both very much could be low-end wide receiver 1s to high-end wide receiver 2s, and I think that could possibly be the floor. Very, very high on this Cowboy offense. What are you seeing, Lamaro?
I'm seeing Dak is back. That's what I'm seeing. And when Dak is back, Amari Cooper is one of the top receiving options in fantasy. So there's a lot of mouths to feed in Dallas. We know that. We know with the 2 tight ends. Is Michael Gallup still in Dallas? You got Michael Gallup there. You got CeeDee Lamb. You got Amari Cooper. A lot of mouths to feed, but I don't think volume is going to be an issue, because Dak is borderline an elite quarterback at this point, and Kellen Moore has very interesting ways of having this offense become very potent. They were putting up, it seemed like 40 points a game last year before Dak went down. The defense is terrible. The offensive line is not what it used to be, but there's enough volume on this offense to support definitely 2 top 15 to top 10 wide receivers, and Amari Cooper is going to be one of them.
And last time I checked, not to rag on your team, Anthony, but I don't think that defense got any better last time I checked. Dowhauer, what are you thinking?
I do like Anthony's point about CeeDee Lamb. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be the most special receiver in Dallas, especially moving forward. Having said that, I don't think that's necessarily a drop-off for Cooper, and I think that having Dak healthy the whole season, as we kind of saw last year, as long as he was out there, Cooper was productive. He runs great routes. He's going to continue to be the guy that's kind of the featured third down guy, the guy that they can look for in key situations. I also think one of the things that got kind of under talked about last year is Amari Cooper went into the season with a messed up toe. He's supposed to miss games. He had some surgery. I don't know if he was ever 100% healthy throughout the whole season last year. So it's going to be kind of curious to see, does he have another gear he can show us this year? He didn't look quite as explosive last year, so I wonder, could he be even better with Dak and have more explosiveness as well?
Adam, let's take it from a dynasty standpoint. Obviously, you have CeeDee Lamb valued more than Amari Cooper, but are you still in the long game with Amari Cooper, even though, let's say, maybe they do try to move on from his contract after next season?
Yeah, what we talked about last episode with John was that if you're playing if you're playing more than 3 years out, you're playing it wrong. So I can live with Amari Cooper for the next 3 years, regardless of where he goes, because I think he's a top end talent. Now, I am worried that because of the sheer amount of weapons in Dallas, that this year he could be stuck as a high end wide receiver too, to maybe getting into 12 or 11. Just because I'm a Gallup believer, I'm a Schultz believer, and I think if Jarwin comes back from that injury, okay, I'm a Jarwin believer. It's going to be tough. There's just so many options there for him to be, in that top 10.
So basically what we're all saying is that Dak Prescott has a chance to be QB1 next year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly think there's a real chance that he could be I don't mean a QB1. I mean the QB1 next year with all those weapons and everything like that. Hey, guys. Hey, you guys got Bush? Because you definitely do if you have not tried the best products from our sponsor for today, which is Manscaped. After using these life-changing products, you're going to want to join a ball sack beauty contest. And I'm looking out for you, too, because I have an exclusive 20% offer for you guys if you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Use it and get the 3.0 Perfect Package Kit. It comes with the essential lawnmower 3.0 waterproof, cordless, body trimmer, and a ton of other liquid formulations to round out your grooming routine. So just use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY for 20% off and free shipping. So the next segment, we're not going to get into everybody because we're running out of time, but I do want to talk about a few names, kicking it off, most importantly, probably with DK Metcalf, who from a consistency standpoint winds up being our wide receiver 13, where 69% of the time, top 36. Now, this has a lot to do with the nosedive that we referenced earlier with Russell Wilson towards the end of the season. I think ranking DK Metcalf is a very, very curious case right now because what is Seattle's offense? I want to start with Anthony on this one. Where are you thinking about DK Metcalf next season?
I'm a little bit worried about DK Metcalf, and it's not because of DK Metcalf. It is because of Seattle's offense. They retained Chris Carson, and that's huge because a healthy Chris Carson, he's really the heartbeat of the offense. That's what Pete Carroll wants to do. He wants to run the football. He wants to give it to Chris Carson, and that takes a little bit of the opportunity away from DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. The defense in Seattle is going to play a huge role on volume for DK Metcalf. Are we going to see the defense from the first 8 weeks, which was historically bad, or the second half that, while the Seattle offense regressed, we saw this defense play like a top 10 unit? There's a lot of question marks here, and this is another one of those situations to where it's going to be cost driven on how much DK Metcalf I roster.
Okay, Adam, what do you think?
And Gerald Everett, let's not forget about him. I think he's going to be a huge, huge weapon for that offense.
Well, they're talking about, from what I heard, that Will Dissly actually has the lead as of now. I mean, we haven't gotten into practice yet, but that Will Dissly could wind up being the starter. Did you ever hear anything about that?
Yeah, but can we trust Will Dissly's health? I mean, Dissly was there last year. It wasn't even a blip on the radar, and I like Will Dissly.
No, and that's the point. He has not been healthy at all for the past 2 seasons. Adam, what do you think when it comes to DK Metcalf?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Anthony. I think the issue is that we don't know what that Seahawks offense will be. And until I know, like you said, it's got to be cost driven. I'm going to treat him as honestly, probably value-wise, probably a high to mid wide receiver too, because he could be that low if they're the run-first offense that Pete Carroll clearly wants. And I think that Russell Wilson, will probably argue his way out of it and be able to, get some passes in there, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to do it unless the cost is right.
He finished the wide receiver 5 in half-point PPR leagues last year. Dowhauer, what do you think when it comes to Metcalf?
I'm absolutely in love with DK Metcalf. I think that he's a superstar in the making, and that we saw a similar player in a similar scheme. You talked a lot about the scheme. We're going to see pretty much what we saw in the Rams scheme. That's what Walton kind of brings with them, which is a classic, more of a West Coast idea scheme. I think he's TO all over again. And I think that you see the blow up year come this year. I think that last year the questions were, was it going to be him or Tyler Lockett? I think those questions were clearly answered. DK is the man at the receiving core. And I think that if that continues to be the case, this is a guy who's going to get better as a pattern, better running patterns, is one of the most explosive receivers out there. Nobody can guard him. And I don't think that Russell Wilson is going to come into this year not trying to throw touchdown passes. I think Russell Wilson has a bone to pick with that Seattle team in some kind of ways. We saw Aaron Rodgers kind of have that bone to pick the year before, and how much Adams got targeted. I think that you're going to see DK become more and more involved. I think that the Pete Carroll thing is overblown. He's always wanted to run the ball. It's not like Darrell Bevell was like a air it out kind of coordinator. So I think that what we saw last year was just a team that kind of didn't learn how to adjust to what they were trying to do. They were able to use the play action a lot and early on and go deep and push the ball down the field. What they kind of lost as the season progressed was the ability to run the ball. And I think the teams wouldn't respect them to run the ball, then you could play, safeties 6-7 yards off the, back off the line of scrimmage. I think that's what we saw a lot of last year that kind of caught up with Seattle teams that started playing, cover 3 shell against them and keeping all the safeties back, and they couldn't throw in front of them. I think this year, if you have any kind of running game, and I think that the West Coast system will kind of bring is a little bit more tackling on the edges. I think you're going to see DK be able to use perfectly because he's going to be able to do that fake block and then kind of get off of routes for that way. You're going to see him being motioned a lot. I just see him having a really big year for Seattle.
Okay, I'm more in line with you, but I'm a little scared, not because of DK, but because of Russell Wilson. Because Russell Wilson, even last year was a crazy drastic difference between beginning and end, but he always has that streak where he gets crazy hot and then he cools way off. You keep going back. It used to be, it happened at the beginning of the season and he would catch fire towards the end. Now all of a sudden, the last, I believe, 2 to 3 years, it's flip-flopped. Lamar, does that part scare you when it comes to DK, or is it what everybody else is saying? Lamar, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
The inconsistency in the passing game, I think, is one of the central reasons that Pete Carroll wants to play smash mouth football and play defense. The only problem with that is that the personnel in the Seahawks offense aren't tailored to play that style of football. They're more tailored to be a passing offense. They have Tyler Lockett, they have DK Metcalf, they have Russell Wilson. Obviously, they have problems on the line, but this isn't 2014 anymore. We're not looking at Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. We're looking at Chris Carson, who's definitely a serviceable running back, but he's not a transcendent type of running back like Marshawn Lynch was. So I think just because of the personnel fits on the Seattle offense, no matter what Pete Carroll wants to do, he's going to learn over the course of the season that the best chances of the Seattle team winning will come when he lets Russ cook. And that means big production for DK Metcalf. He's a man-child.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to love watching him play, if nothing else. I want to skip ahead to Terry McLaurin because I want to talk about the magic or non-magic of Ryan Fitzpatrick and what he does for his number one receivers. I'm going to put this out there right away. I don't care about Curtis Samuel when it comes to Terry McLaurin at all in any capacity whatsoever. I love, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm not a Ryan Fitzpatrick guy. If you guys, we've been working together for a few weeks now. I've talked to Anthony. He's been on my show one other time before. What you guys don't know about me is that I'm not an underdog guy. I don't care about the Ryan Fitzpatrick story. I don't care about the Gardner Minshew story. I want them to actually be good. I don't care. So anytime teams sign Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm going to just roll my eyes. I'm like, you got a guy who you're not going to go to the playoffs with. But in this instance, with Terry McLaurin, fantasy purposes only, I'm super, super excited because now McLaurin has a legitimate shot to actually finish as a top 12 wide receiver. Are you with me, Dowhauer?
I'm absolutely with you. I think we saw last year when Fitz is out there, he gets his playmakers the ball. He's going to do it come hell or high water. The one thing that people seem to kind of forget, I'm not a Fitzpatrick fan necessarily either. He didn't get benched for per play last year. He got benched the rookie. But when he played, he balled. So, I mean, there's nothing that makes me feel like he can't be productive. And I look at the Washington offense, and there's nobody that really strikes fear in me that's going to take away his targets. You talk about Curtis Samuel. The only reason I would worry Curtis Samuel is if Kyle Allen becomes a quarterback or something along those lines. Otherwise, I think Terry McLaurin's going to eat. I definitely think he's a top 12. I think he's going to sniff the top 5 consistency-wise because I think this is going to be a player that you're going to see that when he was healthy last year, he was already productive despite the poor quarterback play that they had in Washington and not really knowing how often he was going to be targeted. With Fitz, you're going to get 7 to 8 targets. You're going to get peppered as number one target in Washington, and that's what he does all the time consistently. So I think there's no way that Terry McLaurin's not in the top 10. and if maybe setting top 5.
I love it. Anthony, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm all in on Terry McLaurin, and we can't forget about Curtis Samuel, but I actually think Curtis Samuel is going to have a positive impact on Terry McLaurin, because not only has McLaurin not had a decent quarterback, but he didn't really have a lot of help in terms of anybody taking the pressure off him. The ball was going in his direction. So I do think Curtis Samuel is going to have a positive impact, take some of the pressure off of McLaurin. You have a quarterback now who can throw the deep ball. He's going to take shots because at 38 years old, he's not going to get benched, or maybe he gets benched, but we know what Ryan Fitzpatrick is. He's a journeyman backup. All of a sudden his career catches fire. And I think the reason why it did catch fire is because he does take those shots because he has nothing to lose personally. So yeah, Terry McLaurin, barring an injury or anything else to McLaurin or Fitzpatrick, he should be a top 10 fantasy receiver in PPR or in any format. I don't even know if anybody plays anything but PPR anymore.
I do. I try to base my stuff off a half point and kind of keep it at that, right. Half point, full point. But yeah, no receiver, double teams, and no quarterbacks. That's what Terry McLaurin's career has been so far. Yep. Lamar, where are you at?
You took the words right out of my mouth. This is the first time in Terry McLaurin's career that defensive schemes, when the opposing teams play Washington, are not going to be solely focused on Terry McLaurin. And I think that's going to produce some great results for fantasy owners. I totally agree with Anthony here that the addition of Curtis Samuel, not only am I not scared of it, I think it greatly benefits McLaurin's fantasy status going forward this season. I'm all in on him as well. I'm going to be super high on him in drafts this year. I hope I don't regret it. I had him last year, and he was pretty damn good. So I'm looking at the situation last year compared to what he's got this year with Fitzmagic and the defense going. And I think that McLaurin's going to have a big year.
Adam, how high would you be willing to pay up for Terry McLaurin in dynasty leagues? How much would you be able to trade away? How high would you draft him in a startup?
I think that I'd say his ceiling for 2021 is about wide receiver 10 to me, just because of how good the defense is, and because I think that if he improves in pass pro, Antonio Gibson could be incredibly productive. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is by far the best quarterback he's played with, and all of those other things you've already mentioned. So I don't need to get into that too much. But with him being a young talent and that's on a good team with a solid coaching staff, I mean, I'd be willing to give up quite a bit for him. I think you can value him similar to his peak, because I think he's only going to get better. I think his situation's only going to get better. I think that organization is definitely only going to get better. They've been making all of the right moves over the last year or so, except for, Snyder still being there. But otherwise, they're doing great.
And they're naming the team the correct thing, according to Anthony as well. There's one more receiver that I want to get into before we wrap up tonight's show. I want to talk about DeAndre Hopkins, because he is number 21 on our consistency grades, but he did finish as the wide receiver 6 last season. Now, a lot of this can get chalked up to when Kyler Murray was injured and he wasn't able to run around. He was a different quarterback. And when he was a different quarterback, Hopkins also suffered at that rate. So when you're drafting a DeAndre Hopkins and you see that he finishes wide receiver 6, but he consistency-wise is more of a wide receiver 2, where are you valuing him for 2021, Lamaro?
I'm valuing DeAndre Hopkins pretty high just because of the sheer volume that he's going to see in that Cardinals offense. I see Kyler Murray not being a pocket quarterback by any means, but taking a little bit more of a conservative approach to how he goes about playing the position, just to keep himself on the field, keep his health right. Because as you mentioned, when he had that lower leg injury, he was a completely different quarterback. Hopkins is his guy. He's obsessed with throwing to him. He's more or less the only big play receiver that he really has on that team. I mean, I don't want to take any credit away from Kirk or Isabella or any of those guys, but I believe that he's going to be throwing to Hopkins a lot. So if you're looking at the way that this Cardinals team is going to operate, it's going to go through Hopkins if they're going to have any sort of success on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm pretty high on him again this year.
Howard, does AJ Green do anything for his value, both not negative or positive?
I mean, not the AJ Green we saw last year. He had no effect on anything. But if it's an AJ Green is semi between last year and the year before, he has a little bit of pep. I think maybe it changes a little bit in the red zone. My fear for Arizona's offense and for the receiving is that they like to run the ball in the red zone with Kyler Murray or the running backs. And then Kyler Murray isn't super effective or efficient in the red zone throwing the ball. So I do wonder if you're using an AJ Green more in the red zone, or you're using him more as your go-to jump ball guy and things along those lines. If Hopkins suffers a little bit along those lines, but PPR wise, I think he's going to have a gazillion 8-yard catches. So I think that's something that you can definitely bank on, and you can pretty much look for consistently.
I mean, Adam, does Arizona just have a rule that you have to have an over the hill receiver playing a big man slot receiver role? Is that a rule in Arizona? Do you know?
I have no idea, but it's certainly shaping to be that way. But in all seriousness, I think that the problem that what you saw with his consistency was one, of course, the Kyler injury. But I mean, he had so many yards, so many targets, and just 6 touchdowns. Like I can't fathom a way that continues into next year, especially not. I will wear it on my chest. I've always been a big Kyler guy. I really believe in him, and I think that he can take that step, even if it is as more in the pocket than he was. So yeah, I believe in Hopkins being a top 5 receiver as a pretty strong possibility.
Anthony, where are you ranking him in 2021 off the top of your head?
DeAndre Hopkins?
Yes.
He's going to be in my top 5 or top 6. I like DeAndre Hopkins a lot, but I have question marks earlier in the offseason. I know Kyler Murray's a little bit banged up, but the issue with Kyler Murray is how much he did run the football last year. It was almost like Lamar Jackson-esque for a good stretch of the year. And I think that's a reason why we only saw those 6 touchdowns from DeAndre Hopkins. So if we see a step from Kyler Murray, and it's a similar step where Josh Allen didn't run the ball as much as he normally did earlier in his career last year, threw it a lot more, which was really good for a Stephon Diggs and the rest of those receivers. If Kyler Murray takes a similar step, even if we do see a regression in yards from DeAndre Hopkins, I do think that touchdown number can potentially go up. So I don't know if we're going to have a wide receiver, number 1 wide receiver, or overall number 1 receiving season from DeAndre Hopkins, but he's going to be a surefire top 5 guy.
Yeah, I mean, can't really disagree with that.
Kyler rushed for 11 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of with you, because I worry about Hopkins. I don't know if I can when I go to project him, I don't know if I'm going to be projecting him for 9 touchdowns. I think 7 or 8 is probably where I'm going to keep him at, and I think that keeps him, maybe because of the overall volume, he's able to maintain that wide receiver 6 like he was this season. But I think it keeps him in that borderline. Are you a top 5 guy, really? And I'm definitely not drafting him in the sense of with the Stephon Diggs, the Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams of the world. And you know what? I will take him ahead of A.J. Brown. I'm not psycho, but I think it's going to be kind of close in my book, quite frankly, because I worry about the lack of touchdowns. But that's going to do it for our show today. Anthony, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Your absolute pleasure. Really added a lot to the show, and really, really appreciate it. Please tell everybody what your next show is going to be and where to follow you and everything like that.
Thanks for having me, guys. I will actually we'll be live tomorrow with Detroit Beastie over at the FF Face-Off. We're going to be discussing top rookie landing spots for fantasy football. We'll be coming back on Thursday with John Lobb, really just talking about the top of the first round, what these trades mean, what players could potentially go where, and other implications. Not so much of a fantasy, but just more of a general NFL show on Thursday with John. And you can follow me at The Real NFL Guru. You can follow my show at the FF Face-Off. And a lot of my written content can be found over at the Game Day NFL now.
Yeah, and guys, I'm not just saying that because he's here. Anthony is truly one of the best minds in the business when it comes to everything football-related, fantasy, and betting as well. Lamaro, what are you working on? Tell everybody where to follow you.
So I'm right now I'm working on an article about Kenny Galladay's fantasy value. I'm curious about whether he's going to be a better or worse fantasy option in the Giants offense this year. And anybody who wants to follow me, you can follow me at BellyUpChris on Twitter and Instagram. Any of my written content you can find at BellyUpSports.com or BellyUpFantasySports.com. And I come on the show every other Tuesday at 8:30. So I'll be back, and I'm excited for it.
Adam, you just had an article come out, didn't you?
It was on Saturday morning. Yeah. I had the tier 5 of my vet only dynasty RB rankings. I'll have tier 4 out at the end of this week. Maybe slip into the weekend. Yeah, I'll have tier 4 out end of this week.
Awesome. And Dowhauer, you're going to be with me on Friday, 11 a.m. on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network from 11 to 12:30. I almost forgot what we were going to be talking about for a second. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft, running backs, and a couple more of the free agency moves that have happened because, there's big things to talk about, like Kalen Balazs signing with the Pittsburgh. No, we're not going to talk about that too much.
Huge.
We're going to break down a lot of the NFL draft, running backs,
Breaking
and everything
news.
like that. Yeah, exactly. You can always follow us at BellyUp MDFF Show on all of your social medias. And, of course, check out the BellyUpFantasySports.com website. Guys, had a wonderful time. Everybody, take care. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Great show, guys.